blind to it. Don't want to hear it, I guess. What they want to hear.
The church in those days fought tooth and nail with every new development in medicine because, for example, tuberculosis, the treatment for tuberculosis was praying to a saint. There was a special saint for tuberculosis, and therefore coming up with any type of treatment or cure for it was going against the will of God. That was perpetuated by this story of Christ driving evil spirits from people and curing them.
Unreal.
Indeed. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon.
You too. One line available. It's in Hillsborough, 990-9352. Bill in Clearwater. Bill, you're on the air at WFLA.
Yes, Bob, I'm at work, and I walk around with the earphones on so I don't disturb anyone. I listen to the Ingersoll for 2 hours. I had heard of Ingersoll in the past, never heard it in its entirety.
It's almost impossible to get his writings.
Well, what I wanted to say was I would have liked to see you give equal time maybe to the Sermon on the Mount and,
I've done hours on the Sermon on the Mount.
Okay, at the time, but what I wanted to point out, and you seem to be the big thing, your objection to religion seems to be the fear that it instills.
Yes.
Okay.
It is probably the fear and the ignorance that it perpetuates.
A lot of listeners out there are probably feeling guilty because they probably have that fear. But there is a quote in Scripture that says, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if you don't have that fear, you may not ever wise up. In fact, that humanistic thing
Why should you fear something that's just?
Because that is the Lord's way. You have to fear the Lord because He is just.
A man should not fear justice. A man should love justice.
No, see, you're turning it around. Fear of the Lord, not of justice. Fear of the Lord is
not the Lord justice? Is not the Lord mercy?
Yes, and that's why He has to be just.
And good? Is not the Lord good?
He has to be because He is
Well,
the Lord.
why should you fear goodness and justice and mercy and love?
It's the same reason you fear a judge if you've committed a homicide and you go before him and are found guilty. You fear that judge. You fear that jury. You fear that prosecutor. But if you would have summed that up...
But wait a second. You have nothing to fear so long as you lead a good life. Correct?
No, there's more than just a good life. You have to...
I don't fear the judge...
Being a good person
I don't fear the judge over in the federal courthouse because I don't violate the laws.
Yes, I understand. But the judge is not God. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.
Well, you tell the guy standing in front of the judge this afternoon, convicted of a crime, that the judge isn't God.
People that commit crime and do wrong, they know that without believing in God. But that humanistic thing you read from Ingersoll...
Wait a second, Bill. I beg your pardon. Are you not familiar with the statistics?
Of what?
95% of the population as a whole believes in God, and virtually 100% of the population in prison believes in God.
Well, it depends on what God you're talking about. The sun god or...
No, Bill. We're talking about the same guy.
There's only 30% at best of the world that are Christians, Bob. And my message...
Well, I was talking about America, right here at home.
Well...
And it's actually much less than 30% of the Christians.
They're only a remnant, and that's the way it's going to be and has been and will be. But my message to some poor Christian out there that's worried now is just what the Scripture says. Don't be afraid of fear of the Lord, and pick up your cross daily and carry it, and keep your eyes on things more heavenly than worldly.
And ignore reality.
No. Be in the world, but not of it. I hope that helps some of your listeners who you're probably confused. And Shirley MacLaine could have wrote what Ingersoll wrote.
No, Shirley's not that smart, Bill. Not that smart at all.
She's smart. She has a couple of books, too. But thanks for your time and getting my call.
Well, Bill, one thing. You see, Ingersoll would have been just as distressed with Shirley MacLaine as he is distressed with the preachers of his day.
Be childlike.
Because Shirley MacLaine also believes in myths and also believes in fantasy and supernatural things.
The answer to it all is be like children. Be childlike and think that way, and you'll find it a little
No, Bill. What you're saying is the answer to it all is to deny your intellect.
No, I
and
didn't
just
say
accept
that.
what someone else has told you.
Children learn every day, and you should learn every day. But don't be a
do,
scoffer.
Bill. I do.
Well, that's why I'm calling.
Every day I learn.
Did you know that fear is the beginning of wisdom? You must have read that.
No, fear is not the beginning of wisdom, Bill.
That's what the Scripture says. See,
I don't care what the Scripture says, Bill.
I know.
Bill, the Scripture also said, Bill, the Scripture also says that God despises a woman's monthly flow.
Well, I don't
Same
recall
scripture,
that
Bill.
Scripture, really.
Yeah, I know it's not a convenient one to recall. Pearl in Lutz. Hi, Pearl. You're on the air at WFLA.
I just got connected and disconnected with Bob. This is Pearl in Lutz.
Yeah, I know you're on the air.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was disconnected. Okay. This thing you read on Ingersoll, I had read parts of it, and it is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I love the part where he said that he's free. And if people would only if they could just see through this religion thing, they could get this feeling. And it's just a shame to see people who are so hung up and so fearful that their life is misery. But one of the things I wanted to mention to you is that are you familiar with the publication Free Inquiry?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Comes out of Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying to get a fund together now to do Ingersoll's house in Dresden, New York. And when they get it done, they want to furnish it with all memorabilia and library and things like that from Ingersoll. And then you're aware of the convention in August, the International Humanist and Ethical Union?
No, Pearl, I'm not here to promote any organizations. I'm just here to get people to think, period. I'm not here to promote any organizations or any conventions or any fundraising. It's not my purpose in life.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of people aren't aware, that these things even exist. And I think there are more people who really have grave doubts as far as religion and will admit it. I mean, no one could run for the United States and say that he was a secular humanist. He'd never get elected, and it scares the hell out of me that we had not one but two preachers running for the highest office in the country in this election. I mean, people are under the impression that this country was founded by religious people, and it wasn't. Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, most of these people were agnostics.
Or deists, Pearl. There's a difference.
Well, but they wrote the Constitution in such a way that they could keep the church from doing what it had done in England. And they weren't religious people, really, at all.
I know, Pearl. Pearl, I thank you very much. Lee in Clearwater. Lee, you're on the air, WFLA.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lassiter.
Afternoon, Lee.
Mr. Lassiter, Robert Ingersoll was a politician and a lawyer. And I have spent most of the last 30 years studying science. I've also studied the scriptures some. Albert Einstein was a noted scientist, as you know. In one law that wasn't mentioned in regards to some of his contradictions was Einstein's law of convertibility of energy and matter under his E equal MC square equation. You can do just exactly what it says in Genesis verse 3. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Yeah, he also separated the light from the darkness, which you can't do.
From that point,
I said he also said that he separated the light from the darkness, which you can't do.
Yes, you can.
I beg your pardon. No, you can't. What is darkness, Lee?
Okay.
What is darkness, Lee?
Okay, I'm going to tell you.
No, I'll tell you. It's the absence of light. So how in the hell can you separate the two?
Well, we have the night and we have the day. We have the lesser lights and we have the greater lights.
No, we don't have lesser lights. We only have one light, the sun.
Well, surely, Bob, you can.
Because the lesser light was the moon, which of course does not give off light.
At any rate, the principle here is that.
And you still cannot separate lightness from darkness.
The principle is from light, which is energy, you can create matter. Now, Ingersoll contradicted that. From matter, you
I do believe I said when I started that there were many mistakes that Ingersoll made, but no one could ever accuse him of being dishonest.
Oh, okay, Bob. I didn't hear every bit of it. I was doing some work, so it was kind of long. I heard some of it. But, as far as the movement of the earth, after the creation of the earth, of course, we do have tectonic plates that are constantly moving. This is post-creation. It doesn't contradict the creation whatsoever.
Oh, it has to.
No way.
Oh, I beg your pardon. God was satisfied with his work, and it stopped on the sixth day. That's what it says.
Well, you know...
Read it and weep, Lee. 990-9352 in Hillsborough, 461-9352 in Pinellas. Lee in Temple Terrace. Lee, you're on the air at WFLA.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lassiter.
Afternoon, Lee.
Yeah, read it and weep. That's what most of them need to do, is read that piece of trash they call the Bible. They read it word cover to cover, they'd see what it was filled with. But I had a message for this Scott that was harping on Christ this and Christ that, and he's the only one. If he would do his research, go down to the library, look it up a little bit. In India, they had Christ. It was all spelled almost the exact same way, the exact same birth legend, mother legend. Everything about it was exactly the same as the story of Christ's birth, including the way he died and who he died between. And he does his own God a disservice if he isn't intelligent enough to go down and look things up.
Does himself a disservice as well, but you're quite right when you talk about doing God a disservice. Biblical scholars are very well aware of, first of all, the contradictions, secondly, the injustice. They're very well aware of all that is contained between the covers of that particular document, very well aware of it, and they do everything in their power to steer people away from the horrors of the Bible, which is being dishonest with the people.
Yeah,
to give a creating, loving God credit for also being a monster, which is what, of course, the Bible does, is ludicrous.
When you go to church when you're a kid, they pick and choose the scriptures you should read and memorize, but they don't encourage the complete reading of the book. And to that fossil they called from Clearwater earlier, he really needs to talking about the learning, all the knowledge was contained. You really ought to go and look at the history of Europe when Christians started coming into power, and just take into account all the libraries and universities and everything that was totally destroyed by the Christians.
Well, there's something else he ought to take into consideration before he bends over backwards to justify the absurdities in the book of Genesis, and that is that nowhere in that book is it attributed to Jehovah, to God. It's just a story.
Quite right.
Doesn't say in there that as God told it to me. It's just a story.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Be good. 2 lines available, both in Hillsborough, 990-9352. 2:53 the time. 1 line open. It's in Hillsborough, 990-9352. Helen in Seminole. Hi, Helen. You're on the air at WFLA.
Hello, Mr. Lassiter. I tuned in about halfway through your program, and I must say I found it very, very interesting. I'm not really, I'm rather ignorant of Mr. Ingersoll, and perhaps later you could tell me perhaps the name of some books or something I could pick up from the library.
Well, you'd have a very difficult time. Ingersoll's work is very hard to come by. Ingersoll is despised by the establishment in this country, just as, Thomas Paine's work is very hard to come by, too, because they both raise some very legitimate questions that don't really have answers.
Yes, it's a shame that more people aren't interested in finding the answers. Myself, I had an Anglo-Catholic background, which was very dogmatic, and I rebelled. My intelligence really rebelled against that. I think Christ was probably a very good person, but I think his teachings have probably been corrupted by men since then for their own interests.
If indeed he existed.
Well, he probably existed as a historical figure, but I think a lot of the things that have been said about him and done in his name since are based on absolute mythology. Probably the fear. People have a fear of knowledge. They seem to have a fear of knowledge. They want to believe in God. They need to believe in God because they want that father figure up there taking an interest, looking after them. They're afraid to take responsibility for their own lives, and it's an understandable fear. I mean, wouldn't it be lovely if there was a Father in heaven who was looking out for us? But it's just doesn't make sense.
It sure doesn't.
No. My own personal beliefs. Well, I try to keep an open mind, but I really can't believe in a God whose image we were created in. I think it's more the other way around. We're creating God in our own image.
Well, considering that God has all the same prejudices that we do, and all these prejudices that make no sense whatsoever, then it does appear, a reasonable man might conclude that it was the other way around.
Yes, I think so, really. When I think back to my school days, I went to a Catholic convent school. I became very, very... When I really looked at the services with clear, open eyes, and I found that it's true what Ingersoll was saying earlier, that these aspects of worship and sacrifice, what sort of God, what sort of... I'm personifying him here myself now, but what sort of God would be interested in us making sacrifices and worship? It's so barbaric.
Well, what sort of infinite, perfect being needs the worship of these insignificant little fleas on this speck out in the middle of the universe? I mean, what kind of God thrives on the worship of these evil, vile little creatures?
How true. And what awful things have been perpetrated in the name of various religions, too. It's crazy to think that there is somebody there. It's unfortunate that people have closed their minds, really, because it is closing mind, because if you look at it logically, it just doesn't make sense. But isn't it amazing how many really people that are otherwise extremely intelligent, when it comes to religion, they believe totally dogmatically. And I've found
that's where my theory that people don't believe in God, they're afraid not to.
They're afraid not to, yes, absolutely, yes.
How else could people of intellect, and there are many people of intellect who firmly believe, firmly, they have to be afraid not to.
Yes, but you never get a logical answer when you ask them why and yes, but, and those sort of questions. They've got no explanation. It's just an emotional thing.
Helen, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Take care. Ken in Port Richey. Ken, you're on the air, WFLA.
Hear from you again. I've got a couple of points I'd like to espouse.
Sure.
First of all, the gentleman several callers back who was saying that something about fear and all this other stuff. Wisdom allays fear, according to the Bible. And the more knowledge you have, the less fearful you can become.
Well, exactly. Nobody ever started studying the sea because they were afraid of it. They were curious by it.
Exactly, Bob. Now, the next thing. Etymologically, if you look up the word religion, you find that religion stems from the word superstition. And that's a fact. You can look in the Oxford English Dictionary and find out that that's the etymological root of the word religion. The next thing, in addition to Ingersoll, who I have his volumes here at home, people should also read Whitman, A Song of Myself. And these people that are condemning and labeling humanists, my question to them is, if you cannot understand man, how in the world can you understand a supreme being of God and expect to accept all of these things that he's supposed to be throwing at us? It drives me up a wall. These people that are afraid of and I'm going to use the label secular humanist, are afraid because of their pessimism, their lack of belief that man can survive, can do what he can do on his own without the umbrella of God.
Well, no, there's a far greater benefit from religion, and that is the relief of responsibility for your own actions.
Right.
Because not only is there salvation with religion, but there's somebody to blame for when you fail. The devil.
Right.
Devil's more important in Christianity than Christ is.
Exactly.
Ken, I got to run out. I'm out of time for this hour.
I understand, Bob. Later.
Thank you. One line open. It's in Hillsborough, 990-9352. Don't venture very far. One more hour yet to go. 3 o'clock. Welcome back. Friday, April the 22nd, 1988. Fourth final hour for this edition of the Lassiter Show. Board's full. No sense in prolonging the agony any longer. David in Lutz. David, you're on the air, WFLA.
Hello, Bob. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
I could not contain myself today. You really got a good show going.
Thank you.
On I'm a philosophy major, so actually, I'm obviously an intellectual orgasm right now, but I sort of miss this a lot, and I'm very, very surprised this is on a radio program. That's one point that I think one lady alluded to. She's also from Lutz, I noticed. A couple of people back here that trying to get organized and all that sort of thing. One other person asked for equal time to demonstrate the problem that I'm bringing out here, is that most people who agree somewhat with Ingersoll, they may not totally agree with him, they have a failure to organize. The one thing that the religious people have in their favor is that they reinforce their belief every Sunday and Wednesday if they have Bible school or Bible, whatever it's Wednesday night Bible night. So their beliefs are reinforced continually. And that is a major source of the problem. Part of the problem of critical thinking is that there's no real education going on. I notice at USF there is a movement afoot now to get a course in epistemology, which is really the theory of validity and knowledge. How do we go about finding out how we determine whether something is true or false, that kind of thing. Logic, you can call it logic if you want. But that's refreshing to know that that may or may not be available at the college level.
Well, one of the great problems is the current establishment in this country, whatever the hell that means, I'm not really sure, really doesn't have any great interest in critical thinking and a population that critically thinks. It's actually against their interest.
Well, I'm not saying anything critically here, Bob, but if we had a decent level of thinking in this country, disciplined thinking, you probably wouldn't have a show if you think about it. Of course, it could be a lot better, a higher quality show, in my opinion. You wouldn't have to resort to selling your tights, or whatever, you did the other day, which I was very sorry to see. But anyway, sorry to see them go, by the way. But there are several things where I can help out, I think, just to, get in and get out here. Robert Ingersoll is not the only person to write a treatise on agnosticism. He was a well-known agnostic. He's really a lawyer by trade. But obviously, Common Sense, The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine, or one of the earlier, he was a rabid atheist, not an agnostic, but he went all the way with it. But there are other things that are going on right now. I mean, God, Man, and the Thinker, Religious Belief, The Existence of God, any of them are available at any bookstore. You can buy them and read them, and they're not that tough to, there are long words like epistemology I just used and teleology and everything else, but they deal with the honest-to-God theories in the belief in God. And critically, also, the pros as well as the cons.
Oh, no, they don't really deal with a belief in God. They deal with religion.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There is a difference between the two to me. Religion is organized. It has dogma. It is, as I said, every Sunday and Wednesday, or Friday, or Saturday in the case of Judaism. But it's reinforced. Religion is an institution more than it is a belief. And the word belief, by the way, a good treatise on that, Belief and Doubt by C.S. Peirce, fantastic. It deals with what Ingersoll did not deal with, mostly because he wrote his at a little bit earlier time than Peirce was writing. It deals with what is the notion of a belief and what is the notion of faith. And the first, dealing with the difference between the two, the first principle of belief is doubt. And faith has no doubt. You hear people a lot of times saying, well, I have faith in, or I believe in, and they think they're meaning the same thing. And in actuality, when you get down and define the terms, the first principle of belief is doubt. So therefore, I really don't believe what I'm believing in, if you understand what I'm saying.
I do.
Faith means I have faith in God, and therefore I don't care what you think, and it doesn't matter whether it's true or untrue. There is no epistemological basis upon which I am basing my quote-unquote belief.
Faith is the acceptance of something that cannot be proven.
Exactly. Well,
that's what faith is. I have faith in you, David, to be a good caller. I can't prove that you are going to be, but I have faith in you.
There are guys like C.B. Martin who will say that I have a perfect belief and faith in God, and I talk to him every day. And that is one argument that agnosticism and atheism cannot really refute. It's an argument from what's called solipsism. Solipsism is the basic belief that all that exists are me and my opinions, or my beliefs, or my perceptions. And it's kind of hard to counter that. If I talk to God every day and it's my own personal language, and well, you're in your own realm. I mean, that's as close to being hallucinatory as possible, you know. But there's no logical argument that you can counter with that. But it's, to me, and probably to you too, it's a very vacuous argument. I mean, what can you say about it?
Well, what it is it's talking to yourself. Yeah. It's reasoning with yourself. It's working your own problems out. You know, just substitute a word or two along the way. Oh, self, I've got myself in a hell of a mess. What can I do to get out of it, or whatever the problem might be?
Absurdity. It's absurd, but some people actually do argue that position. And in fact, it's recognized as the only position where you can actually stand up all day and argue it and probably win, quote unquote, if you can win something like that. But anyway, I just had to call. You know, I listen to your program occasionally. You know, I steal myself away from my computer. You know, and how's yours doing, by the way? Did you get it fixed?
Oh yes.
But anyway, I could not avoid not calling. It was.
Well, thank you, David.
Encourage you to keep doing so.
Take care.
Thank you.
One line available. It's in Hillsborough County, 990-9352. George in Tampa. George, you're on the air at WFLA.
Hello, Bob. Thank you for bringing Ingersoll to your listeners. I have a few quotes, if you wouldn't mind, from Ingersoll, very short.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. There is no harmony between religion and science. When science was a child, religion sought to strangle it in the cradle. And then,
which is a fact.
For a fact, he who endeavors to control the mind by fear is a tyrant, and he who submits is a slave. And another, the church has always been willing to swap off treasures in heaven for cash down. And finally, if I were a god, I would make health catching instead of disease. And well, that's about it. I have my view on. The last caller mentioned a few things. As far as God, what is God or whatever, I believe there are, as many gods as there are people who believe in God. And each one is different. Because each belief or what impression or perception of God it would be different in every instance. And as far as the others that might speak of God or what is your impression of God, Frank Lloyd Wright, who died about 25 years ago, he was interviewed by Mike Wallace at one time, and Mike Wallace referred or made reference to his non-belief. And Frank Lloyd Wright replied, I spell nature with a capital N. And I would believe that people of the Frank Lloyd Wright type, they would, of course, share the views pretty much of Ingersoll. So again, I want to thank you for bringing him. I didn't think I'd ever hear his name mentioned on our radio here.
George, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Take care, Rick in Clearwater. Rick, you're on the air at WFLA.
Hello, Bob Lassiter.
Hi, Rick.
Am I glad to finally get a hold of you? I can see now why people call in and they call you names and write you nasty letters, because you're taking people out here in this audience, and instead of allowing them to accept things without question, you're making them think. And that's just terrible of you, isn't it? Us poor people out here have to finally think. Well, let me add a little fire to the fuel on this topic today. If these people would go to their ministers, priests, rabbis, and whatever, ask them to dig out some information about the Council of Nicaea, Nicea, in the year 533. It happened in a town called Constantinople. It seems that way back then, a group of fellas got together and they thought that people needed a little more control. So a lot of those things that we feel are so precious in the Bible today were sort of rewritten so that we could have a little, or so there could be more controllability over little people like me and you and everyone else. And a lot of these things that were rewritten were things like, what ye sow, so shall ye reap, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, the Bible has about 125 different instances in it. I sure don't have time to, tell them all all to you now, but it seems that all the teachings, be it Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, all the spiritual teachings tell us that, like kingdom of heaven's within you, know thyself, that will set you free, to thine own self be true. I simply take all this to mean, and I've done a lot of studying on it, is you and I and everything that we experience good is what God meant us to be. And instead of believing all this, people ought to try experiencing it a little more. Because there's good and there's bad in all of us, we all know that. But the good part of us is so dang deep and hidden by society as we know it, that when you get on the air and you start these people thinking, they start thinking back, now wait a minute, that just doesn't set right. If God done this and that, and here I am sending all this money each week to this guy that's standing up on that pulpit, and he's not only not coveting my neighbor's wife, he's doing a job on secretaries and this and that, so he can slide with it and we'll still back him. People are thinking, and that's what I think. You are so marvelous. You could not beat me off of listening to you each and every day with a stick, because finally people's minds are opening up. I guess I'm a little
careful. That's what Ingersoll thought too.
Yeah, and he did a magnificent job of it.
He was convinced that the Christian religion would be gone by this point in time. He was convinced.
Well, the Christian,
another area where he was wrong.
Yeah. Well, everyone has their own belief in what religion is. I don't care if they sit in the church all day long. You know, you've got churches where you're allowed to sit in there all day long. You're allowed to go out and get drunk and do a job on your neighbor's wife. But if you come back the next week, hey, and you say, I'm a bad guy, it's okay. That isn't religion. That's a cop-out. And that isn't what the good book says. And so many religions interpret it the way that religion needs to hold their numbers. Again, it's control of people. But if they would ask their ministers, priests, rabbis to check that out, the Council of Nicaea in the year 533, I think they'll find out some things that'll really make their hair stand up on end, because it's very, very interesting.
Rick, thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
You too. One line available. It's in Hillsborough, 990-9352.